Hey everyone, this is Noor, co-curator of the book, The Year Time Stopped, The Global Pandemic and Photos. So for this book, we wanted to explore life during the pandemic through 200 photos and videos from around the world. And it's basically two parts. The first is alone, the second is together. And we wanted to show how at the beginning of the pandemic, people felt more alone than ever. And we wanted to show that sense of isolation. It has different chapters. The first one is showing the world before the pandemic and how the first part of the year looked like. And then the second chapter is empty spaces, kind of the idea of showing how spaces suddenly felt empty. During the first months of the pandemic, it felt very isolating. Everyone was at home. Felt kind of like a lot of spaces, especially public squares, felt like ghost towns. You can see here there are square streets, abandoned malls, abandoned airfields. Everything felt abandoned and kind of eerie. And then a big part of the pandemic was the hidden heroes, the essential workers, the healthcare workers, the people that were really on the front lines while we were all sitting at home. A lot of people were at home. Most people were outside on the streets, bringing us the essential care that we need, the essential groceries that we need to continue. Kind of from the beginning of the supply chain till the end of the supply chain, whether they're barbers, service, people in the service industry. A lot of people saw we wanted to show how people really appreciated that people were risking their lives to make sure we were safe. So there's a lot of praise in the book for essential workers, especially healthcare workers. There was a tradition where people would clap for them every day in the US at 7 p.m. I'm sure in other countries there were similar traditions. Flight attendants, people working in tobacco fields, working in farms, making us food. You kind of see the spectrum of people throughout industries and sectors really bringing us the services that we need during this hard time. This next chapter is social distancing. We wanted to show kind of in religious spaces how people socially distanced, which was very interesting visually that we found people on the subway, people in waiting rooms, on buses, in the parks. There was this kind of weird circles that people would draw around themselves to make sure even outside they weren't, they were kind of isolating. And even in care homes, you can see kind of a distance between people and their loved ones. Lockdown lifestyle shows this kind of new normal, how people were wearing masks, how people were getting tested for COVID every day, people's reactions. It was very unpleasant, clearly. And we really wanted to show that no matter which country you are, we all kind of went through a collective experience together. Things were missing and kind of running out, like scarce, like toilet paper, and it felt very unlikely that why this item would feel scarce. People did weird things like put masks on their dogs, and that felt kind of funny to see. This is another picture. People would have tan lines of their masks going to the beach. This is one of my favorite photos, the cyclists in Vietnam. People would do exercises on the rooftops, go to schools, just kind of feel very isolated and kind of a new normal. Virtual living. Here we wanted to show people attending weddings. Like you see these guys standing outside a church looking at a Zoom wedding, kids having to go on Zoom for the first time and study remotely. These people are watching another Zoom wedding. You see, here people are watching movies from their cars. Living in isolation, that's, I think, one of the biggest parts of the pandemic is the mental health issues that people were facing. Living on their own, we wanted to show that isolation. The elderly in hospitals, kind of not being able to hug their grandkids and kids because their children were worried about them. So that was kind of one of the biggest sad parts where we couldn't really be close to our grandparents during this time. Even performances were done with masks. You had a lot of outdoor creative kind of displays during COVID. This is one of my favorite chapters. It's love and connection. There were a lot of obviously Zoom weddings, and a lot of weddings in forests, and people kind of getting married on their own without their friends and family nearby. You see this is also one of my favorites, the family on a motorcycle, all wearing masks. Like this is another favorite. It's a couple with gloves on their wedding day. So part 2 is together, and for this we wanted to show that people came together despite everything, despite the lockdown, to protest a lot of injustices like Black Lives Matter and climate injustice that have been uncovered during the pandemic globally. And it felt like this sense of togetherness and overcoming everything, which was really, I felt, uplifting. People were distancing together. I live in New York, so I saw this kind of energy where people came to protest Black Lives Matter, and the police brutality and the killings. These protests were in Lebanon. People were also going through their own revolution. This one's from Hong Kong. This chapter I love too, it's about fists raised in solidarity. And you kind of see this fists as a symbol of people showing solidarity with each other, which I thought visually was very interesting. And obviously you have the breaking point here where there was a lot of violence during protests. Like, this is an LGBTQ protest. This is from Lebanon again. This is also Lebanon. This is in Greece, a lot of migration, refugee migration. You saw in the US a lot of destruction of statues of Confederate figures that people felt didn't represent them and were a symbol of racism. You see here burning cop cars. A lot of it has to do with police brutality. Police brutality we saw was really global, in Russia as well, in Ukraine, in Hong Kong, Lebanon. And it was really beautiful, especially during 2020, how people felt that now more than ever, they needed to be on the streets protesting. And one other thing we wanted to show is the losses and damages. The deaths during COVID were really, really astronomical and really sad for everyone to experience in their own family, with their friends, the losses to the environment, so much pollution. With this photo, there are a lot of mask pollution in the sea. There were a lot of forest fires as well that we wanted to show. In this photo, these neighborhoods are razed to the ground in California by forest fires. This one is a fire in the Philippines. This one is particularly sad for me as a Lebanese. It's the explosion that happened in the port in Lebanon, one of the biggest in the world. So we wanted to show that as well in the year 2020. The last chapter is Future Leaders. It's kind of ends the book on a high note of showing that there are young people leading the revolutions globally, and hope is not lost. And we wanted to show the resilience of the human spirit in this book.